Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Want to thank any new subscribers to the channel. Thank you so much, guys. It really means a lot to me that you take an interest in my process and my work. I really appreciate it. Um, and it's great again to be to inspire people and to be inspired by other people's work and comments and enjoyment in this whole process. And I really truly mean that. Thank you so much. Um, Recently, I was just asked a very general question about more or less how I finish my work, and specifically with respect to burnishing the wood as opposed to using sandpaper. So I just wanted to just talk about some of my process here the best way I can. Um, so we'll get into, let me remove the sandpaper real quick. We'll get into burnishing. What is burnishing? So through research and through practice, from what I can see right now, and of course I'll learn even more as I move along. Burnishing is the act of kind of compressing or pressing down the wood to get a if you will, a polished or smooth finish on the wood without using sandpaper. And you can use many different types of, I guess, tools to burnish. In the case here, I have some stones that have been rounded by rushing water. I've seen people use a hardwood, such as maybe holly or I don't know if oak is used. I don't use it myself, but I've seen people where they describe how they use like a hardwood just in replace of a stone to burnish. Also, actually, another thing that comes to mind is a deer antler. I think that guy Clipnocky Woods. He's all over Instagram. He uses, from what I can tell, a deer antler to do the same process. Um, So what I use specifically when I choose to burnish are stones. And here's some examples. This is actually the one I have in my hand is one I use very often. It's just simply rounded, has different shapes. It's kind of flat, which is good for different parts of the spoon. Um, you know, uh, Not much to that. Here's another piece here that's kind of flat, and this is actually good for. I have a spoon here that I've already finished. The straight edges or flat edges, I think, are good for coming along the side of the neck here and just kind of rubbing it in. Um, you just have to really experiment with different shapes. There's a bigger piece here. All of these different angles of the rock can be used for different parts of the spoon. You just have to experiment with it. Have a smaller guy, which is good for little crevices or little. If you have some high spots from one of your tools, it's kind of comes to a slight point. You can really get in there and press that wood down and get it smooth or even. So those are just some examples of some stones that I use when I burnish. And so, how do you burnish the wood? What's the technique that I use? So um, I'll just kind of show this spoon here since I just brought down some of my examples really quick. So if you see here on the back of this bowl here, the facets. Well, what I did was I actually used one of the stones, probably this one, probably this one here, and just simply started going in circles, not pressing super hard. You just have to see how comfortable you are doing that with the wood. You can press pretty hard if you choose to, but just be mindful that you may break the spoon. I just simply use the weight of the stone itself and just start going in a circular motion. Sometimes I just go across. This is just what I use. I'm sure other people use different methods. And you see the facets there, but it's actually very smooth. Now, is it as smooth as the inside of the bowl? Um, No, because there's facets here, so you can feel the tool marks. The inside I actually sanded because this is an eating spoon. I just thought maybe uh, for it to be cleaned a little easier, it can just kind of the food can just come off as you're cleaning, um, and it gives a nice shine. Well, it's all shiny, I guess, because it's oil I use too, but it has a nice feel to it. So you basically just use it. Um, I guess just like you would sandpaper, and you just use the different shapes of the rock to go on different contours of the spoon or the bowl or whatever it is you're making. And again, understanding what burnishing is, you're just simply pressing the wood down. Uh, I guess it kind of seals the wood down. Now there is some uh, talks about, do you oil the piece first and then burnish, or do you burnish, which again is pressing the wood down, and then you apply your oil finish or finishes over top of that? I've done both. I don't know that it matters. It's all the same to me, really. So not sure what you would do first. You just have to experiment and see what you prefer. I'm sure people who are more experienced will tell you, no, you have to oil first and then burnish, or vice versa. I'm not really sure, but that's basically really the gist of it. You're just pressing the wood fibers down. I will make a quick note that when the I guess better your knife work is, you won't have as many high facets or tool marks on the piece. And when you go to burnish, that will make it that much smoother. What are you doing, cat? Oh man, this cat is like scratching me. Um, so the better your knife work is, the more I guess smooth. No, 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 no! Oh boy. Look at this crazy cat. There's a funny story with this cat. Look at her. She's so bad. Get down. I'll tell you about that in a second. Oh man, she's nuts. Um, she definitely wants my attention for sure. So, where was I? So the better your knife work is, the I guess smoother it'll look with burnishing. Okay. Um, there is an awful lot of discussion through the internet when it comes to hand carving. Um, when you're talking about just using your knife, your tool work to finish the piece, and God forbid you use the dreaded uh, sandpaper. If you use sandpaper, you're in some circles you're just not considered a talented carver, or whatever the discussion is. I don't really subscribe to that. So I look at sandpaper as another tool in your toolbox, and if you know how to use it properly, um, it's a great tool to use. Um, so much like the burnishing, you're finishing your work with sandpaper. Now it depends on how you want to use a sandpaper. Uh, that's will depend on how your finished product will look. If you take my approach with sandpaper, which is it's just a tool to refine the work, not to completely change the shape of your work, um, things will be a little bit better. If you're using your knife and you're like, oh, I messed this up, I'll just fix it with the sandpaper. I mean, if that's the look you want, I mean, it'll look a certain way. But I tend to subscribe to, let me shape the piece pretty much, exactly how I want it with the knife, and then if there's any like slight like high spots, like with a tool mark, if I want to sand it, I'll just sand that away. Um, and that's kind of how I use the sandpaper. I don't use it to drastically change the shape of the piece. I don't do that at all. So we'll bring this walnut cooking spoon in here. So if you see, the inside of the bowl is completely sanded up to 2000 grit, sanding all by hand. And if you see the rim here, I like to keep that pretty sharp. And when I use the sandpaper, I don't use it by sanding and then sanding over that rim, because that'll round it off, and I don't necessarily want that on my work. I like to keep that kind of sharp edge. It kind of gives it more of a hand carved look. And on this piece, I just only sanded the bowl. Everything else is knife work and then burnished here. So even the inside, the neck, the outside here, handle, everything is all just burnished. And I did a pretty decent job. You can't even tell. So this one I did a pretty good job on. So with the sanding, you have to realize you are removing material. You're removing wood. Um, you have to understand too that it creates a lot of dust, so you have to wear this proper safety uh, equipment, goggles, dust mask, open area where it's you're not going to affect other people or animals. Um, I like having a contrast of having a completely smooth bowl with a kind of more or less rough exterior where you can feel the work. That's just my approach to it. Even on the back here, it's very smooth from burnishing, but you can feel the uh, the ridges or the waves. Waves is probably a better description of the piece. And then when you go to feel the inside, you're like, man, that is smooth. That's like polished. That's just what I like. Again, I think that when you clean this item, it cleans a little bit better as opposed to having all the tool marks in there. Um, so it's really what you want to do. If you want to sand the entire piece, that's perfectly fine as well. It's really up to really a personal preference. But just because you're using sandpaper does not mean you're a less skilled, carver, craftsperson than someone else. Um, so if you take that approach with the sandpaper, that it's just another tool and that you're not trying to um, round corners over because you didn't feel like doing it with the knife. If you want to do that, that's fine. But if you're just simply, getting enjoyment with the process of using a knife and an axe, um, you're kind of losing that look when you're using the sandpaper to completely alter or change the outlook of the work. If you want to do that, that's completely fine. Nothing against it at all. It's up to you. But I generally just use the sandpaper to make very slight refinements to remove those ridges of spoon knife or occasionally knife work or something. It really depends. But I like both techniques. I use them both. Um, Kind of gravitating towards burnishing as opposed to sanding with my work now. Not all of it, but I think it depends on the piece. You have to, it's kind of a tough discussion because it really a lot of factors play into this, guys. Um, if you want that texture of the tool work, but you want it kind of smooth, then you're going to burnish the entire piece. And there's nothing wrong with that. I like that look. I like the way it feels as well. But in some applications, you maybe you want a completely polished look with sandpaper. That could go to, what application is that? Maybe a more decorative piece where you want it to be, let's say you're making a bowl, like a big bowl, centerpiece bowl. You're hand carving it, but then you still want that completely high polished look. Well, maybe sanding uh, will work in that application. We're getting into what I'm doing now, which is trying to sell my work at festivals. Um, some people appreciate the hand carved look and feel of a completely burnished piece. Others really appreciate the smooth, highly polished finish. Like, for example, my wife loves it when it's completely polished. Some people like that as well. So it's really what you want to do with regard to how you want the piece to look. Um, the burnishing, it's the same process as sanding. You're just maybe putting a little bit more pressure into, pressing the wood fibers down, and then sanding, you're simply removing the material to get the desired look. Um, I approach both the same way, using them the same way. Um, and through your own practice, you'll get your own technique down on how much pressure to put onto the wood with the stone. Light in some aspect, in some parts you do very light pressure, and in other parts you really get in there and press really hard. Through practice, through experience, you'll learn what works best for you, and ultimately you'll get your own system on how to do it. So I hope this helps. Hope it answers some questions. I think it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. Just getting a rounded stone and start rubbing it. I would suggest getting different shapes like I have here. Some round guys, some flat pieces, some weird shaped little guys. You don't know how. I mean, and they're free. You just pick them up out of the water, and now you have tools, and you'll start to gravitate towards a certain stone. Like, for some reason, I always pick up this guy. This guy is very versatile for me. It works great. Again, this has some different applications, and so does this and this, and I have a bunch of others as well. You just have to experiment. And again, like I said, I just use it as the same process as sanding. And just remember, this is my opinion, that if you do choose to sand, does not mean you are a less skilled carver as someone else who doesn't use sandpaper. It's a choice. If you want to do away with sandpaper, then you just have to practice more with your knife work, your spoon knife work, and that's really it. So I hope this information was helpful. Please, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me here on YouTube. You can leave a comment, and I generally get back to people right away. You can send me a message on Instagram. Follow me at The Bearded Carver. You can also send me an email as well. The Bearded Carver at gmail.com. I'd love to answer any questions that you may have. And if you have any suggestions on anything that you want to see in the future, please let me know, and I'll make a video of it. I have no problem doing that. I enjoy it. So if you stuck around this long, maybe you want to hear about the cat that jumped into the frame. So about a month ago, out my backyard, I have a fence surrounding the outback. I don't have much, just really to park a car. And so when I would take the trash out, this stray cat was coming over, and very, very friendly. It's a stray cat, super friendly, rubbing on my leg and all this other stuff. I'm like, come on, cat, get out of here. So every day I would go out back and do certain things. The cat would come running from one of the neighbors' backyards and start meowing and looking at me. And so for about the first 2 weeks, I would not feed the cat. Well, of course, as a human that I am, I love animals. The cat grew on me, so I started feeding it like tuna fish. I'm like, oh, maybe it'll just go away. Of course, it didn't. And so, long story short, I spoke to my wife. We realized the cat was pregnant. It was coming over every day. Started jumping on my lap when I'm out in my garage. I said, I would just feel awful if something happened to the cat. Let's take her in. If she has the kittens, great. We'll find a good home for them. So I'm going to pan over here. There's the cat. and we named her Cuxa, which is pretty cool. And there are her kittens. There's 5 kittens. One is already spoken for. We're going to keep one. Not sure which one we're going to keep. So these kittens are a week old now, and what a great experience, you know. We're going to definitely find some good homes. There are some shelters here in Philadelphia that are considered no-kill, meaning they do not euthanize the animals. They'll find homes for them, which is, if we don't find homes for these kittens, we're definitely going to do that. So here's our cat. She's only about 10 months old, and we're going to keep one of the kittens. So I'll have 2 cats, which I never have envisioned this a month and a half ago. Never would have realized I would have had to have a cat. So it's pretty cool. So if you see me talking down here to the cat, this is the cat. And it'll be one of the kittens too soon. So yeah. So anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll catch you on the next video, guys. See you later.